Kaler. He was actually born in Spokane, Washington, so he's a Washingtonian, and he's now a wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Migratory Bird Management Office in Anchorage, Alaska. He leads several marine bird research and monitoring projects in Alaska, including monitoring population trends of marine birds in Prince William Sound following the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill, and restoration of pigeon guillemots at the Naked Island Group following removal of mink. And he also follows the statewide Aleutian Tern Colony, the North Pacific Seabird Colony Register, Cook Inlet Seabird Colony Survey, and breeding biology of Kitzlitz's merlets in the Aleutian Islands. That's hard to say that. So he did go to Evergreen State College, where he got his BS degree, and he got his MS at Kansas State University. So thank you so much, Rob, for being here this evening. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about pigeon guillemots in Prince William Sound.
Yeah, how did I do? Did I share the right screen?
You did.
Oh,
looks beautiful.
Yeah, and thank you, Shannon. That video was tear-jerking. It was inspiring, and you all are inspiring it, as well as Dave. That's whatever you guys are doing, it looks amazing, and I look forward to seeing what you guys do coming from the state of Washington, hopefully coming back there as my parents get older. Excited to get back on the west side of the state. But yes, I was born in Spokane, born and raised, went to the Evergreen State College. So, and you see my screen, although it doesn't seem to be lighting up, and maybe I break Zoom every now and then.
We can see it. It looks great.
All right. Yeah, that's excellent. So, pigeon guillemot restoration in Prince William Sound. And really, I want to say Sam Stark, he was a graduate student from Oregon State. I'm going to use a lot of his slides. I'm going to go through this. I guess a quick time check, Shannon. How am I doing?
Let's see, we're at 7:50, and we have it until 8:30 for the presentation and questions. So
all right, so
got lots of time.
So I don't need to speed through it. All right, no. So Sam Stark, David Irons, Kathy Kulitz. I mean, we all stand on shoulders of giants that came before us, and so a big shout out. Are we recording this too? Because I want to make sure that they're okay. I want to make sure that if they see this, that I shout it out. And of course, our funding partners, the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council, Oregon State University, APHIS, that's at the U.S. Department of, yeah, they actually did the animal removal that I'll get into. And then of course, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation that has helped fund this. So again, yeah, I won't spend too much time on this, but I do a fair bit of different projects here in Alaska, based in Anchorage, not too far from the airport. And I will drop my, well, maybe Shannon, you'll drop my email. So if you do want to help out with any of these projects and you're interested, we're always looking for engaging with other folks. And it sounds like you guys are doing amazing work in the Salish Sea on guillemots. So I will just kind of speed through this, but one of the things that we have coming up is in the Cook Inlet, we're going to do a seabird colony census funded through the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And we do an Aleutian Tern project as well. So those are things that we're actively doing for the next 2-3 years. And then Quiana is thank you. And that's kind of the land acknowledgement. So we're not on land. I mean, our birds breed on land, but we're doing a lot of our survey work in the waters off the shores of the Alaskan waters. So Quiana to all of our partners, the Inupiaq, the Siberians, the Yupik, that's in the Bering Strait. And so some of the information I'm going to cover is including those folks, but specifically for this talk, the Tlingit, the Haida, and the Tishmian. And that's where, thank you for letting us work. And of course, all of our other partners, Quiana to them as well, that are supporting, funding, and collaborating on this work. So Environment Canada as an example, USGS, Alaska Science Center. I could go on, but we have a lot of partners, and it's an amazing opportunity to collaborate, much like what you all are doing. It's again, that video that Shannon put together. I wept. It was beautiful. It's so neat to see you guys doing everything that you do. So in Alaska, we talk about, these are my two slides, and I'm going to say 30 million birds breed in Alaska, and another 30 million come to Alaska during our summer, and by ours, they breed in the southern hemisphere. So those are the shearwaters. So this is a picture of shearwaters, sooties, and short-tailed that come up, and I say they take our resources, but no, we're sharing, and what really is, they are sharing their resources with us. And so there's another 30 million birds that even migrate up because of the high productivity waters in Alaska. And so this is the bird that this is how I get young people and excited about this. This is the Harley-Davidson of seabirds. This is a tufted puffin, the leather-clad Harley-Davidson biker type. It's got ear piercings, it's got big hair, but really, I mean, let's just cut to the chase. The guillemot. What a charming creature this guy is. And so this is an illustration from Eric Baker. He's one of the folks that helped out with Prince William Sound Marine bird surveys in July. But what a great bird. It's charismatic, and I won't go on and on about that because you all know how cool they are. And then we talk about common prey items in Alaska. So Dave touched on this a little bit. And so it was great to watch what you guys are doing and talking about. And so this is my basic slide where I say common prey items of seabirds in Alaska. So we've got sandlands, highly nutritious, prey quality, great. But they're in the near shore, subtidal. And then there's good years and there's bad years. Then we've got capelin, very much a cold water associated fish, but very high prey quality. So as ocean temperatures, especially in Alaska and probably in your neck of the woods too, or your neck of the waters, increasing sea surface temperatures and temperatures in general in the ocean, cold water associated, the capelin, high quality, but we're seeing fewer and fewer of them, and we're seeing them move further north. Juvenile walleye pollock, so lower quality prey, but their distribution is expanding. And so that warmer water, and this is also a commercial, commercial. So I'm sure most of you go to your freezer at your Fred Meyer's or your Rosars or whatever. And this is what you're finding there. So pollock. And then juvenile Arctic cod, they're further north. You're not going to find them in your freezer, blocks in Washington. And then euphausiids and the copepods, these are the really important because they're they're feeding everything as you go up. Locally, seasonally abundant, high quality prey. And we're probably really not understanding how much euphausiids and copepods contribute to the food system. And so what I saw Dave and Shannon talking about, we have no idea what guillemots are eating during the non-breeding season. So that's something to consider and think about. And then here's my example. The common murre weighs about 1,000 grams, and it needs to consume on a daily basis 10 to 30% of their body mass, which I know I could drop off about 20 pounds right now. I'm 49 years old, and I could drop off 90. And they need to eat 90 to 300 fish per day, and that depends on the quality of those fish. So something to consider, and something that when I talk to young people or even my leadership in Fish and Wildlife Service, something that needs to be addressed. And I'm just kind of putting this out here as a big picture idea. This figure here, which I really like, and I don't mean to spend too much time, but when Dave was talking about kind of the longer term like data that you are collecting, this is productivity. Reproduction, as Dave mentioned it. This is long term. This is like 40 years. And I'll just quickly, can you see my cursor, Shannon?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, yeah, very quick. And of course, you don't see guillemots in here, but red-faced cormorants on the left side across the right to least auklets. And then I go to the bottom here, primarily eating fish to primarily eating plankton. And what I wonder is, and I think guillemots are eating probably mostly fish, but maybe in the winter they're eating, and somebody can correct me in the audience for sure. But anyways, this is kind of from the North Chukchi Sea, northern Alaska, down into the Gulf of Alaska. These are the long-term sites that we have. And you guys, I think you guys have 8 sites. Is that correct, Shannon?
We have 8 regions.
8 regions. Yeah. And so from those regions, what we have 8 different sites that we're intensively monitoring, these different species. And so what you see is way above average, meaning like they did really good. And this is from 2023. This is last year. And I've colored this in. It doesn't come this way. I have to pull out my Crayola crayon. I colored it in. The nice thing is complete failure, boo, and very depressing. And when we had a 2014, 2016 heat wave in the Gulf of Alaska, we had a lot of complete failures, which for these seabirds, that's very uncommon. It does happen. It's not to say it's, unusual, but in that year in particular, it was very unusual. So take home message from this 2023, and maybe some things that you guys want to consider how you share your information that you're working very hard at. Here's a nice, and this is how we share it out. But overall, 2023 is actually a very productive year. And again, guillemots are not here, but we're looking at seabirds in general, from red-faced cormorants all the way over to least auklets, and we got parakeet auklets, etc. So I'm going to move pretty quickly. So one of the things that I got to do when I came into my position with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Migratory Bird in Anchorage was taking over the Prince William Sound Marine Bird Survey. And that survey was after the Exxon Valdez ran aground in 1989 on Bligh Reef. So that was a huge impact, and I'll get more into that, but here's the big picture right now. And this goes from 1989 to 2022. That's how much data I've been able to analyze. And we're running around Prince William Sound, these Boston whalers. They're 20-foot Boston whalers. They've got twin 150 Honda horsepower motors on the back. As you could imagine, it's an adventure. I love it. And let me know if you want to come take part in that. In that lower left corner here, that's the idea where we've randomly selected 20% of the coastline. And this was based on David Irons' 1984, 1985. He did the entire coastline of Prince William Sound, all the coastline counting all of the birds. And so when the Exxon Valdez ran aground on Bligh Reef in March 1989, the royal biometricians selected 20% randomly. Let's make sure that we're covering all of this area, but randomly, because we don't want to introduce bias. And so that's the red lines running coastlines. And I really do wish that they would have selected if there's a bunch of reefs that you need to avoid, let's not drive a boat 300 feet off the shore. But anyways, they didn't. So, and these are the population trends. And I've selected, here's 9 different species. Guillemots here, lower center left. And so guillemots, that slope, that indicates, and so you see from 1989 to 2022, that overall is a negative slope. The p-value there, that p-value is basically indicating that we're pretty confident, because it's less than 0.5, that truly the guillemot population in Prince William Sound has declined from 1989. And you see this gray area, that's that 95% how confident we are, 95% confidence interval around that point estimate. And we haven't done it every year. This is 17 years. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, no, 17. But you see down here, guillemots are not doing well in Prince William Sound. And I won't spend any time on these other species, but what I was trying to indicate here is there's good years and there's bad years. And now this is where I'm going to lean heavily on Sam Stark. So Sam actually works for the GS National, he's a graduate student that we had working for us, Oregon State, and he's apparently out in the field because I wanted him to know that I was using all of his slides. Anyways, so here's the naked island, and this was Sam's master's project. He was at Oregon State. And so you see, Kathy Coolitz was out there in 1983. Well, she was actually out there in 1978. And I think Kathy she was invited to speak, and Kathy's retired. So she says, well, maybe Robb will want to do this, which I'm flattered to be invited. But you see, this is a population size estimate for the naked island group of guillemots. So on that left side, you see 1977, 78, the population mink were introduced. So at one point, somebody decided, I really want to trap mink, and I want to do it at Naked Island. So they brought mink out there, and that wasn't prohibited back in the 70s. And so there's other introduced species into, purposefully or not. So here's an Arctic fox, and there was a lot of introduction of Arctic fox throughout the Aleutians, for example. And then rats, they get on islands, and that's just shipwrecks that were already infested with rats. But then mink, and that was purposeful at the Naked Island group. So this figure is just kind of showing that timeline, 1980 to 2010. And you see, these are our population counts as we were collecting them following the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And so mink introduced, we had about almost 2,000 breeding guillemots. And then by 2010, it was I think it was 75, it might've been 55. I forget the exact number, but here you show, and we're drawing a line between points, but you see the point. So the Exxon Valdez oil spill happens, and then that direct effect. And so when we say that end of EVOS, Exxon Valdez oil spill direct effects, that's to say that at that point in 2003, there was no longer any lingering oil in that near shore environment. It's not to say that there wasn't anything going on, but the direct effects based on taking blood from birds and testing it, we no longer felt that was an impact to the population. So data collection, this is with Sam Stark, nest searching at the Naked Island group, and then survival. And so being able to get into those nests. So, I'm not going to say that you guys are lucky, because I know you work hard to collect the information that you do, but here at Naked Island, these folks are roping up, putting on a harness, and I'm glad that it wasn't me. And then nest substrate and vulnerability. So I'm going to go over this really quickly, and maybe something that's very pertinent to what you guys are doing. So different parts of the nest or the cliff, burrows at the top. I mean, these are burrows. So the soil is soft and they can dig in. And then you got the cliff face. So those are crevices and stuff where a guillemot can get in and lay an egg. And then talus, everything that crumbles down to the bottom. So those were the three different substrates. And what happened over time is that before mink were established, so on the left side of this is a histogram, 1978 when Kathy got out there to 1984, 1989 to 2008 in the center, and then 2017 on the right. These are Sam's figures. What you're seeing is nesting survival percentage. You see on that left side is that when Kathy was out there, Kathy Coolitz, the mean was about 75%. So that was before mink had become established. And then by 1989, 2000, you see a decline in the actual number of nest survival. And then by 2017, after mink had been removed, it increased back up to 86. And so you don't see any air bars, which this is just indicating like what's our confidence. And so we don't have those type of data, but you see that once we remove those mink, and I have another figure that will kind of demonstrate this. Going back to the substrate use, you see Kathy, 1979. And so green on the top, that's the burrow. And that burrow being, that's where they could dig down. But of course, that's where mink could get to as well. And then talus on the bottom, that's where mink could get to as well. But that cliff face, that the beige or yellow color, that's where birds were safe. So anyways, this figure is showing percent of nests. I'm going to go pretty quickly, but you see in 1979 that there were birds breeding in the talus, there was birds breeding on the cliff face, and there were birds breeding in the top where they could actually maybe dig in. By 2008, when mink were established, here it's saying mink common, you see that most of them are just here in the cliff face. And there were some at that top part, but these were still very accessible to the introduced mink. So this is the year that we, beginning in 2015, when mink removal was started. And you see this increase. I'm gonna go through this quickly, but they began, guillemots began nesting up in the burrows on the top. They were also still on the cliff face, but the neat thing to see about that is they were going into areas that perhaps they had been extirpated from due to mink presence. And then the talus, maybe that's part of how they maintain their population despite having mink there. But throughout, you see in the cliff faces, the crevices, that's where mink remained. And so Sam Stark's conclusions, and I give full acknowledgement to Sam because he worked very hard. Mink removed, that appeared to be a primary limiting factor. Guillemot populations increased very quickly after that. I've got a figure that I'll show you. And then, what we're assuming is that nestling survival was not limited by other factors. So basically, it was having mink on that island. So the insult to injury, the insult being the oil spill, and the injury being an additional having a factor of mink present on the island that previously had not been there. And so the nest substrates shaped that predator community, that impact. So here's kind of a figure I'll go over this very quickly, but there's a before after impact control, a Backey study design. So we had the actually impacted area was the Naked Island group, Story, Naked, and Peak, 3 islands there. And then we wanted to compare that to areas that had never had mink introduced or present. And so there are mink present throughout Prince William Sound on the shoreline, but they'd never been. They swim, but they don't swim that far. And so our control was Fool Island to the west, and then Smith Islands, Little Smith and Big Smith, and then Seal Island. And so this figure here is showing the Naked Island group is in the black line. And this is in 2012, but you see, this is as we started removing mink, that population increased. The yellow or mustard line there shows that, well, here's the control islands being Fool, Smith, and Seal. There's good years, there's bad years. They're kind of going up and down. But once you remove mink, and this is the red line showing when we removed mink starting in 2014, and by 2017, 18 was where we basically validated we have not seen any more mink. And this is Sam's work, the guillemot nests. And you see an increase in the number of guillemot nests at the Naked Island group. So, and then the other thing that Sam, glad it was him and not me, social attraction. And I'm not sure you guys need to do any of this in your neck of the woods or waters. But social attraction was one of the chapters that Sam did. And we were excited to have guillemots recovered, but the other impact at the Naked Island group following the oil spill was tufted puffins, Aleutian terns, and parakeet auklets. And if you don't know a parakeet auklet, this is one of our decoys. Very attractive bird, but they had historically, along with tufted puffins and Arctic terns, bred at the Naked Island group, and following the oil spill and then mink introduction have not recovered. So the setup, these poor guys, and I'm glad they got to do it, but one of these, you bolt them into a mat, you carry up two 6-volt batteries, solar panels recharging it, and then playing playback to bring birds to see if you could expedite the recovery of the birds, parakeet auklets, Arctic terns, pigeon guillemots to the Naked Island group. And so I'm not going to go over that too much, other than to say, well, at those social attraction sites, which Sam had 10 of those, well, parakeet auklets actually, and he's got great, we then put up, we put up cameras and documented that parakeet auklets actually came back into two of the historical colony sites. However, Sam did not witness any attempts by guillemots to return to any sites, but there was that one that appeared to be parakeet auklet appeared to be attempting to nest. So with that, I was trying to keep it, maybe I was too short, but open up for questions or thoughts.
You're right on time. Thank you so much, Rob. I think you've given us some ideas.
And always happy to follow up with thoughts. I mean, you guys are, again, that video, Dave's sharing of the information. I mean, you guys are doing some really awesome stuff. And it's something that it'd be wonderful to be able to do something like that in Alaska, but it is inspiring. So I want you all to know that. That was cool. That's awesome.
So how do you survey the birds? Are you mostly doing aerial surveys, or are you actually doing, I guess you are doing some sort of nest surveys?
We were doing nest surveys, yeah. I didn't go into that too much, but boat-based surveys. So the 25-foot Boston whaler circumnavigating all of the islands, and then we do. And so and then our protocol, so it's usually late May into June, and at the high tide. So our protocol is very late, when the because we're counting them in the water. You guys are looking at them, going up to their nesting crevices and burrows. We're counting them on a water for a total population estimate. So that is a total, we're counting everything that we see. And we believe that they're attending colonies during the high tide. They're displaying, which of course we all love their displays, which your video is amazing, the images that you have there. But they are displaying off their colonies, reestablishing with their mates before they go up and begin either copulating or breeding. But our stuff is all boat-based and on the water. So we are 100 meters, 300 feet off the shore.
Great. Do we have any questions for Rob? I'll be monitoring the chat as well. So if you wanted to drop a question in the chat, I can relay that to Rob. Kathy.
Hi, Rob. This is Kathy Bauer on Whidbey Island. And I was just wondering if you had any experience with artificial nest boxes in your travels, or it didn't look like you didn't have to introduce any artificial boxes, but have you run into that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kathy. So Greg Goulet, back in the 1990s, did his PhD, and we still see those, don't tell the US Forest Service. I'm sure there was permits for that, but they did that where they tried to, so some of those nest boxes are still up on the cliffs, but it didn't work. And it might be something that works in your area, but at the Naked Island group, it didn't, nesting sites were not the limiting factor. So limiting factor, probably mink, insult to injury was the oil spill. And then now there's food. If I might go on a little bit, but 2014, 2015, the heat wave, the blob, as they called it, or as we call it, the guillemots actually still did very well at Naked Island. So we either did great removing the mink, maybe the food was still there, the resources and the nutrient content of those fishes, and they're near shore foragers, but did not seem like nesting sites was the limiting factor. Do you guys think that do you think that might be a limiting factor in your?
We've just been talking about, because of there's been a nesting on piers and old docks, and as those start to come down, or pigeons and mammals get in there, there's been some talk about adding more nest boxes. So I know that Frances would have asked that if she was still here or thought about it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And some of, we work with folks in California, and that was one of their questions too, is they were taking down a bridge that guillemots were nesting on. How would that impact the population?
Yeah, and talking with Scott Pearson, who's works with WDFW, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife actually tried to put in some nest boxes around Puget Sound, and they were not very successful. We do have a few boxes at the Fort Worden Pier still, and the birds seem to like to sit in them, but we have yet to see them actually delivering prey to these nest boxes. So I think they learned that the pigeons like to use them more than the pigeon guillemots. So.
Yeah, no, that's interesting too.
They have used them on Protection Island with some limited success. As far as yeah. So we have a question from Terrence, who's a fellow Geoduck and the former coordinator for the South Sound region. And he's wondering if you have a sense of citizen science in general up in your neck of the woods, avian or otherwise.
Let's see here. Not to get everybody depressed before they go to bed, but seabird die-offs have been a huge issue in Alaska. I know in the lower 40, and I know some people don't, we don't mean to refer to you as the lesser or lower 48, but we in Alaska, somehow we have some issue, but a lot of seabirds have been dying, washing up on shore, counting that. So we work with the Coastal Observation and Seabird Survey team very closely, COAST, based out of the University of Washington, Seattle. That's been as an example of elevating citizen science and work in Alaska. That's kind of been a huge example. And so working on other things, we have indigenous, I always have a hard time pronouncing that, Indigenous Sentinels Network. And we're working with everybody, whoever, and I'm a shore person on the coast. So anytime that we can get reports of observations, so the Indigenous Sentinels Network is an example, and then working with our captains that are managing boats, whatever they see, reporting that. And so those are examples of some of the citizens, and I call it citizen science, call it captain science, call it whatever you want, but reporting those observations is, well, as funding for the, my agency, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it's been challenging. So we continue to rely heavily on partners, including citizens and other agencies. So that's my long answer. My short answer is write me and see what we can do. But yeah, you guys are doing amazing. Very neat to see what you guys are up to.
Well, I think seeing what you guys have been dealing with up in Alaska, especially following the oil spill in mink, it just makes me realize even more how important our study is, that we have this data. You know, if anything should happen, if some kind of disaster or natural event happens, we've got data that we can look to and
Yeah,
use.
exactly, Shannon. It's just like, yeah, oil spill response, ship groundings, and then mariculture, aquaculture that's being pushed forward pretty heavily here in Alaska, probably similarly in Washington. And where are these birds in there? You know, the interactions, the impacts of that industry, and we don't want to poo-poo. We want to support it, but we want to do it in a prudent, pragmatic approach.
Exactly. Yeah. Are there any other questions for Rob?
Yes, I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kathleen O'Shaughnessy, and I'm in Olympia, so surveying in the South Puget Sound area. I wondered, first of all, the presentation was very informative and helpful. I think those of us who are citizen scientists will be urged to continue our work, knowing it's adding
Then I succeeded.
knowing it's adding to something that's pretty important, I think. But I had a question on the surveys. I don't know what time of the days that people do the surveys. In the South Puget Sound area, do we always do them? Our group did it in from 8 to 9 in the morning, and I'm wondering if other groups surveyed at other times of the day, and if there's any information to suggest that might matter about the food deliveries, either time of day and or tides. I'm wondering if there's any impact that is known about that.
We do survey sometime after the sun comes up, and then the survey has to be done by 9 a.m. So everyone should be surveying in the morning before 9 a.m. And there is actually a correlation. I think maybe, Rob, you mentioned that too. There's a correlation both with time of day and tidal height. So, and it depends on each colony. Each colony is different. It depends on, you know, how shallow it is or how steep the beach incline. So there are a lot of factors that go into determining PIGU activity, but it tends to be highly correlated with the time of day, so early in the mornings, and then also high tides seem to show a lot of activity as well. So,
okay, thank you.
Yep. Let's see, Reed has a question. We do see a lot of serious eagle disturbances, but little, if any, predation. And they're curious if that's true for you as well up in Alaska, because you have a lot of more than us, I think.
Yeah, looking at what Dave presented there, the pie charts showing disturbance, you know, and we love the fact that eagles and all the other raptors are recovering following DDT. So that's awesome, but we definitely are concerned how eagles are impacting. And it's not so much eagles. I think Dave might have mentioned that nobody's, perhaps, you know, sorry, don't mean to say nobody. Observing an eagle taking a guillemot has not been observed, but what happens on many colonies, and I'm a seabird person in general, so guillemots is just one piece. But when a colony is disturbed, a eagle flying over, for example, it's all the other predators that come in. Guillemots, being crevice and burrow nesters, probably less impacted, but at the same time, it's disturbance. And so I'm thinking of ledge nesters and here in Alaska that an eagle flies over, and then you've got, let's see here. Well, I just start, you know, we got our COVID, well, we used to call them American crows. And I guess now they're, well, Northwestern crows, now they're, but magpies, Yeah.
Even gulls, I think, will. they don't-
Gulls, yeah, everybody comes in and eats the eggs, but those are mostly ledge nesters. So I'm just kind of thinking about how eagle presence and disturbance would be impacting guillemots. Maybe that's on the water that they're being disturbed. Or
It is mostly on the water.
yeah.
They tend to hold prey. The birds tend to hold the prey rather than deliver it.
Mhm.
So the guillemots are, yeah, staged off, waiting to feed. They've got and then the eagles are interested in that. So
Yeah, I think usually the eagles are just cruising by, but the guillemots take
Yeah.
off. So they're not going to stick around and find out what the eagle's up to.
yeah, eagles have definitely, this is actually something I've been triaging my inbox this last 2 weeks. There's a lot of concern about feeding eagles, particularly for, I think, tourism. And it turns out it's not illegal to feed eagles for tourism, but that's something that happens in Alaska. Probably, maybe not if you want to go photograph an eagle, you just go out your door and go down to the Skagit or wherever, right? I mean, here in Alaska, we got a lot of tourists coming up. They want to see the eagles, so there's a bit of feeding, but it's not illegal. There's the Golden and Bald Eagle Protection Act, and it does not prohibit feeding eagles, for example. So, but their populations are doing pretty well in Alaska, and coming from Washington, I know eagles have been doing fairly well, and the Skagit in particular. That's where we would go and take photos.
So Linda's wondering if pig ewes have unique wing patterns.
Unique what patterns?
Wing patterns. So I think she's talking about the white wing pattern.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. There's probably better, somebody.
I
might
would say
have
that they do, actually. Just from looking at a lot of photos, I've seen some with some really unusual wing patterns. I mean, in general, they look similar, but every so often we see one that looks different. So it can happen. We had
No, that's a good, that's a cool question. I hadn't really thought about that. I'm just glad that they have white wings so that I can, find them as I boat by.
They're easier to spot than the auklets. Well, thank you so much, Rob. This has been wonderful just to get a glimpse into a different pig ewe population and what's happening up there in Alaska. And we are at 8:30, but I thought I would also open it up if anybody had any questions for Dave really quick. I don't want to keep anyone too long, but I did not ask if there were questions for Dave earlier. Anything pressing?
I have questions for Dave, but I can follow up later.
All right. Well, if there's anything else that you wanted to know, you can shoot me an email or Rob an email or Dave an email, and hopefully we can get some of those questions answered for you. So that's what we have for this evening. Thank you everyone for being here and just for a wonderful season. It was great working with everybody and getting stories and photos. Oh, I have a question here from Jackie before I sign off. Go ahead, Jackie.
So this is Dave. From looking at your data, would you say that the guillemot fledglings are somewhere between the 2nd week and 3rd week of July?
You're asking, do they start to fledge at that point? Let's see, if we back that up, say 35 days, we're into what, about the middle of June. Yeah, that they could. Oh, I'm sorry, the middle of July, you said, Jackie?
Well, yeah, second week in July, sort of.
Yeah, definitely. Some of our, we have a south-facing rolling hills colony that is very warm, and it starts early every year. And they were definitely fledging by that time.
Okay, okay. I was just wondering, like with the eagles, they're sort of fledgling right around 4th of July, and that becomes an issue with the cacophony of fireworks on Whidbey. And with the Guillemot being obviously in the bluffs above the shore, I was just wondering if that has any impact but it sounds like they're fledging a little bit later maybe than the eagles, or maybe right about the same time, but.
Yeah, I think I mean, some of them are early, but I don't know, Shannon, do you remember when people started reporting the first fledgling sightings this year?
Oh gosh, it was definitely, I think it was towards the end of July, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen sooner, because we did have some prey deliveries in, I think, the 3rd week of June.
June
So
10th were the
it could
first
be
one.
around middle of July to 3rd week of July that we would expect to see some fledging.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I do want to mention, I forgot to place that story map link in the chat earlier, Rob. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, probably confusing everybody.
I
But
had it in
yes,
my notes, but Rob has a story map. Maybe you could just speak about that really quickly and tell us what that is.
Yeah, that's basically a better version of what I just gave you all. We had an undergraduate at Williams and Mary, but the recovery following, the insult, the injury, and how Guillemots are doing after that. And I lean on all of David Irons, Kathy Kulitz, Dan Roby, Sam Stark. So that was what I threw in there. So, and I am really kind of curious about the food quality and items that you might be seeing being brought back, the photography that you might be able to do, the citizen science contributions to capturing that, as I touched on.
Sure.
There's different food that some of it's good and some of it's just like a bag of Doritos. So anyways,
Which I
for
imagine
another
the
time.
is, or maybe the shrimp. Yeah,
Costco shrimp. I love that. That's
I
the
know, it's
frozen.
good stuff. All right, well, thank you so much. And thank you again, everyone. Thank you for putting in all the early mornings and the effort, and for loving the birds.
Thanks,
We
Shannon.
appreciate you. All right, take care. Have a good evening. Good night.